Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is a used book haul. So, actually a few weeks ago now, right before we left on a little family vacation, our local library was having a book sale. It had been going through renovations actually the last few years, so it hadn't had a book sale in a while. And of course, you had COVID going on as well. So I think this is really the first book sale it's had in a few years. And took my son, and I was surprised. There were some pretty good things there, and the prices were actually excellent. I think it was $1 for hardcovers and 50 cents for paperback. So I've got a pile of books here of things that I picked up at the book sale. And again, nothing costs more than $1. So I figured I'd show them and just briefly talk about them. So here's the first one, by Meg Bogan. The Women Troubadours, an introduction to the women poets of 12th century Provence and a collection of their poems. This seemed like a pretty cool topic. So this is actually a little bit of an older book. Let me see if I can find when this was published. I think it was published around 1980 or so originally. And it looks like an introductory essay about these women troubadours. And then you end up having a bilingual text of the poem. So you've got French on this side, and I'm guessing, I mean, of course I don't know, but I'm guessing this is like, Old French, or maybe Middle French or something like that, and then you have the translation. So this is something I might do for next year's Historathon. Take a look at this possibly. I think one of my focuses I'm playing with for Q2 of next year's Historathon, which is a yearly reading event where we look at nonfiction history, and we divide the year up into 4 quarters, with each quarter looking at a different time period. The second quarter looks, at least in the Western world, at what we would call the Middle Ages. And I might devote a month to looking at women's history during that time, and this might be one of the contenders. Got another medieval book here, and also another older one. So this is the Medieval Underworld by Andrew McCall. Who I don't know a lot about McCall. I tried looking into him. I don't think he was really a historian. He seemed to also maybe write like erotica. I'm not really sure. But nevertheless, this looked like a pretty cool topic. So for some of these, I feel like I kind of have to read what this is about. So I'm not going to the material for all of these, but this one I'll do it with, and maybe one other or so. In writing this compelling book, Andrew McCall has had to pose 2 questions, both of which have no definitive answers. What were the Middle Ages, and what constituted an underworld? It could be claimed, for instance, the Middle Ages did not even begin properly until the 10th or even the 11th century. I'm not worried about that. Let me see. The underworld, in his view, comprised all those people who were either unwilling or unable to comply with the law of the church. The medieval underworld considers such sections of society as outlaws and brigands, homosexuals, heretics, witches, prostitutes, thieves, fraudulent beggars, and vagabonds. Both their activities and their punishments, often barbarously savage, which were meted out upon them by state and church. So essentially looking at the people who didn't fit in. Some of them are criminals, some of them were maybe just more misfits, or could not, conform to the church, and I'm sure especially the church, but also the state. So this just seemed like a really interesting book. Maybe contender again for next year's Q2. I'm not entirely sure. I think I want to research a little bit more about this, and also Andrew McCall, to see if this is going to be a book ultimately worth reading, because this is one that I think came out like 1979. But like I said, I couldn't find a lot about McCall, so I'm not sure. This is like 50 cents. I picked up this graphic novel, Star Trek Countdown to Darkness. In addition to creating Historathon, I also have created another reading event that is currently going on called Book Trek, where we read Star Trek fiction, and that can be novels, it can be graphic novels. I read both, and I saw this library book sale in the pile, and this is basically a graphic novel prequel to Star Trek Into Darkness, the second film from J.J. Abrams in the Star Trek Kelvin timeline. Now, that's, in some ways, it's a really dumb film, but I don't think it's not entertaining one. I think it's still a fun movie, despite some of its flaws. And I've already read this, and I'll make a video about it for Book Trek, but it ended up not being bad, especially for 50 cents. Got this one here, Traveling Heroes in the Epic Age of Homer by Robin Lane Fox. Somebody who I have not read anything by, but I know that name quite well. I believe it's very well known in the classics world. And this is one that I kind of have to read also, the back here. It says, the myths of the ancient Greeks have inspired us for thousands of years. But where did the famous stories of the battles of their gods develop? Yet how did they spread across the world? In Traveling Heroes, the celebrated classicist Robin Lane Fox draws on the latest archaeological evidence and his own travels and a lifetime's knowledge of the ancient world to answer these questions. His acclaimed history explores how the intrepid Mediterranean seafarers of 8th century BC Greece encountered strange new sights, volcanic mountains, vaporous springs, huge prehistoric bones, and weave them into the myths of gods, monsters, and heroes that would become the cornerstone of Western civilization. So it seems like he's looking at the way people traveling in the ancient world helped to develop the myths. I think that's what this is. If you've read this and I'm wrong on that, please let me know. But yeah, I will say a lot of these books were in really good condition. I don't think this has ever been read, but yeah, this seemed like a pretty cool topic. I also picked up a pretty nice hardcover edition of Dead Wake, The Last Crossing of the Lusitania by Erik Larson. I had read Erik Larson's In the Garden of the Beasts and also, The Devil in the White City, which I really liked. I really like Devil in the White City especially, but I liked them both. So I liked both those books and figured give this one a try as well. I don't know, this might be a contender for Q4 of this year for a Storython, but I'm not entirely sure. But if people have read this and they watch this video, I'd love to hear what you thought about it. And here's one, in like 50 cents. So this is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Hopefully I'm saying that right. This is a graphic novel. I think it was also a novel and then it became a graphic novel. Might be wrong about that. But one that I have seen talked about very, very highly. As you can tell, I do like graphic novels. But wanted to pick this up, and it's, from what I understand, about basically a memoir of a girl who lived through the Iranian Revolution. The Islamic Revolution. So I've heard very good things about this. This might be something I also maybe read for Q4 of Historathon. I think that fits. And this was, never been read, obviously. But this is a Princeton classic. So this is Shamanism, The Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy by Mircea Eliade. I'm probably saying that wrong. I did reach out to one of my Historathon co-hosts, John David, who knows a lot about different Princeton releases, and asked him if he knew anything about this book, and he said that this one in particular, no, but he had read things by his author before, and they've all been really good. So I do have an interest in, I would say, non-Western, or I guess, yeah, non-Western religion for the most part, in paganism, in pre-Christian religions. So this one seems like it could be really interesting. This was originally published in the 1950s, 1951, I believe. But just looking at the contents, we have basically shamanism from all over the place. We've got things about the Australian shaman, South America, let's see, Siberia, Polynesia. So it looks like this goes in depth in a lot of different ways. I don't know when I'll get to this. Maybe this will be a maybe Midrash selection at some point, but I don't know. I feel like this is something I'm really going to have to, it's a big book. And there's a lot in here. So this will definitely be a task when I finally do get to it, but it seemed like a really interesting topic. And I've got two larger books. The first one I had seen talked about. One of my other co-hosts for Historathon is Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. And I'm pretty sure he had recommended this book in his basically pile of possibilities or recommendations for Q3 of Historathon, which looks at the years 500 to 1820. And this is the illustrated Longitude. So the true story of a lone genius who solved the greatest scientific problem of his time. So I've seen this talked about very, very highly. This seems to actually be a pretty quick read, but of course this is the illustrated version, so we get all sorts of images to go along with the reading. The book itself is in pretty good shape. I mean, the dust jacket's a little bit rough, but the book is actually pretty good. So this is one I was actually hoping to read for this quarter of Historathon. I don't know if I'm going to get to it, but it's definitely a contender. Still have a month to go, but we'll see what I can fit in. And the last book is another big oversized book. Let's see. We got the AngloSaxon Chronicles. The authentic voices of England from the time of Julius Caesar to the coronation of Henry II. So even though it calls the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, it is not exactly the proper Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which I believe was first established by King Alfred, which was way after Julius Caesar. So they're using this term, but this is a very broad look at the history of Great Britain. And we do have some, it looks like, selections of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle within there. But we also have large full-color images, some explanatory text. I have read through a lot of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle before, but this seemed like a pretty cool addition to add. So, just give you an idea of some of the images in here. So this is something I'll peruse through. It'll go on my shelf. But again, this is $1, so pretty cool find for me. Absolutely. And that's it. Those are all the books that I picked up secondhand. Like I said, I think this pile came to like $12 or something like that. This was nothing. Maybe I want to keep going back to get more books, but I know I have to control myself sometimes in a lot of ways. So this is what I picked up secondhand. We got the AngloSaxon Chronicles, Longitude, the Medieval Underworld, a Star Trek graphic novel in there. We got Traveling Heroes, Dead Wake, Persepolis, Shamanism, and the Women Troubadours. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear what you thought of them, so I know what to expect. And as always, thank you, BookTube.